Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, good morning. Good afternoon, I guess. Hopefully everyone had a great lunch and are ready to go for a wonderful conversation here with a tremendous public and private sector leader. Penny, I'm looking forward to learning from you today and sharing your perspectives with our audience.
Well, likewise. Thank you.
So we got a lot to get into here today, And I'm going to start with what's probably on the mind of everybody here, the economy. Now, Penny, I know a lot of folks come to you over the years to get your interpretation of what we're seeing and help read the tea leaves. And I want to start there. You know, when you survey the current macroeconomic landscape, what are some of your thoughts?
I start with the problem of uncertainty. So first of all, how many people in this room feel a certain amount of uncertainty? Okay, great, I'm not alone. I think uncertainty is one thing, I think chaos is another thing. And we have a combination of both. And it's not a political statement, it's a set of just kind of looking out at the landscape and recognizing the realities. And when I think about tariffs, when I think about what's happening in science, and when I think about sectors, right? There's just a ton of uncertainty. So if you take tariffs, for example,
Sure.
If our goal is we're upset with the rules of our trade relations with China, which is important to everybody's supply chain, I don't care who we are, because we are all using some product that has something from China, even if it's not something we're making or something we're engaged with. I don't get the strategy. I don't get attacking everybody across the board around the world simultaneously with the idea China's up here and we've got the biggest 145% tariff increase on them. So to me, and I think, and it's not worked, so hence they pulled back, which is not what you want your government to be doing. And then to announce today, okay, we've got a deal, we're not going to put tariffs on UK steel. Let's go look at how much steel comes from the UK. Not a lot. So I'm not, that doesn't make sense. Instead, why aren't we going to our allies, particularly the Canadians and the Mexican leadership, and saying, you know what, the North American platform, which is the way I think about it, is a huge asset if I'm all about America for the United States. And why aren't we tightening our relationships rather than picking on each other? Now, the idea that I'm going to really annoy you and then I'm going to make a deal with you, it doesn't really build trust. So to me, this issue of uncertainty and the chaotic approach is what's really on my mind. And it's what I'm struggling with as a CEO and as a leader. And so what are the results that you think about when you're dealing with that? First is there's market churn. Okay, the stock market dives like crazy on Liberation Day, right? We're up now again, we're back maybe where we were, maybe not quite where we were. That volatility is not helpful either. For those of us who have to go out and raise money, that volatility makes investors nervous. Am I getting this at the right price? What's going to happen next week? So it's difficult. And the thing you need to remember is a trade deal is not just what am I going to pay for this jacket? Right. They're complex. I've negotiated trade deals. They take time, and it's not just the tariff amount. It's all this what they call non-tariff barriers. My access in all these different sectors, to your economy, et cetera. So it's really hard. And then think of the other implication. Another thing I'm worried about. Yeah. Look at what you're hearing from our West Coast port operators. I think deliveries are down 30, 40+%. That's going to hit our shelves in the next several weeks. So, you guys who are in supply chain, are seeing it. You're seeing it more up close than I am day in and day out, but it's going to be felt.
Outstanding. Open and salvo. Love it. Setting the table there. I want to call out one point you mentioned. The special relationship we have across North America. It's one of the most unique trading zones in all of the world. And I heard one of our guests said one time, we've all heard the phrase the American way, and we kind of get a sense of what that means. But they wanted to tout the North American way. And I think that really speaks to the opportunity we have between Canada, US, and Mexico, kind of to your point.
That's why I call it a platform.
Yes.
It is a platform if we can figure out how to use it. And most of your large customers, your big enterprises, think of it that way.
Yes.
Particularly manufacturers.
I want to follow up one more thing. You mentioned kind of between the volatility and the West Coast ports, some of the critical signals that you're watching in terms of what you think those signals may parlay into what's next, what's coming next. What other signals are you tracking right now?
So there's 3 or 4 that I focus on. One, GDP growth, obviously. It's not so good when GDP growth goes negative, which it did last quarter. Remember, recession is 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. So this is one we should pay attention to. Second is 10-year Treasury yields. What's happening with Treasuries? That's going to affect your cost of capital, but it's also going to tell you something about the stability of the United States. Unemployment trends, obviously. Remember, we're pretty stable so far. We're not laying off people. We're in fact, 177,000 people every quarter, or not quarter, this past month, and only 4.2% unemployment. So I pay attention to that. And the other is consumer sentiment. And consumer sentiment stinks. It's bad. It's not showing up yet it's interesting if you talk to the heads of banks, it's not showing up in credit card receipts yet. But what's happening is credit card spending is shifting. People are spending more of it on basic goods and less of it on things like travel or restaurants and things like that. So it means people's lives are being impacted.
No doubt. Spending is really tied closely to our quality of life, and I'll be watching. I'm adding all those signals to what I track each and every week. The Penny Pritzker factor, I'll call it. All right. Anyone here heard of the term, the acronym VUCA? No one really?
Okay, I'd never heard of it until I prepped for this. So
right,
you're not alone. Okay, explain.
No
Tell us what that means.
All right, so VUCA's been around for a long time. I think the U.S. military is where it originated. So VUCA is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. I think we can all feel, at least in my perspective, between the economic factors you mentioned, some of the supply chain goings on that you mentioned, and plenty others, and just kind of where we are right now with policy. I think we're all in a highly VUCA environment. Would y'all generally agree? Maybe? Okay, some headings. So adding another acronym. We love our acronyms in global supply chain, don't we? I want to ask you though, one theme that has emerged here in despite all the chaos and the uncertainty is there's lots of opportunity. There's lots of opportunity. Would you speak to the opportunity you see in terms of transforming the chaos and uncertainty into opportunity, and of course managing the risk all the way?
Yeah, so I'm an optimist. So even if I start off by saying I don't like the uncertainty and I'm uncomfortable in chaos because I like things orderly, it's easier to make decisions. I'm an optimist about the United States, and I believe long-term the United States remains the best place to invest. And why? And this is the thing we need to think about, why. The why for me is stable rule of law. So we as citizens have to really say it's important we have stability here. It's important that our courts are dependable. It's important that we have checks and balances. And I'll say an aside. When I was Secretary of Commerce, which is an amazing honor to have had the job of serving our country, I went around to countries that didn't have what we had. They can't grow the same. They can't innovate the same. And it's not a place, where people want to thrive because there's uncertainty. If I have to know somebody in order to get access to sell my product, as opposed to I know I have an open right to the marketplace because I can depend upon the rule of law, and I know somebody's not going to show up at my doorstep and give me a pay or, in order to access your market, less economic growth happens in those places. So this stability, dependable courts, checks and balances is critical. Remember, we have the best technology ecosystem in the world. We absolutely do. It's because every one of you in this room, you dream it, you can make it. You can make it happen. How many businesses have you started in your career? Third. Okay. You could be a serial entrepreneur in this country. Nobody has to give you permission. You just have to have the gumption and be able to convince people to support you. We have the best and most talented workforce and innovative workers. People want to be here. They want to be here because they know they want that freedom and flexibility. We have the most stable banking system and investment system. We have incredible natural resources, and we have what I think is really important. We have dynamic and patriotic business leaders like all of you in this room who care about our country. So we have every reason to be long-term optimistic. What we have to do is make sure that that stuff is not hurt. And we have to speak out if that's being threatened. And I'm worried. And so I'm worried about the policy choices that are being made and the start and stop aspect of it. It undermines all those things that I just listed that are all our advantages. And the world's competitive, we know this. And so, that's the thing that's on my mind.
And we got to lean into all those advantages you mentioned, going back to the geopolitical allies, to all the wonderful assets we have that make up our competitive and economic advantage here, right?
Yeah, and we shouldn't take it for granted. I think the lesson, I think it's hard, I'll say particularly for me, most of my career, which is longer than anybody's in this room, I suspect, has been in a time of stability, relative stability. There's up and down and you don't like this, and COVID kind of threw it, the great financial crisis, COVID, et cetera, but they didn't kill us, these things. They didn't go at the basic fundamentals that I'm talking about. I'm worried about the fundamentals right now. And instead of all that, we ought to be focused on investing in our infrastructure. Everything from air traffic controllers to bridges. We need more affordable housing. We need more support for our workforce. You guys all need talent. And when I say guys, I mean ladies and gentlemen. We have a great innovative healthcare platform in this country. We're innovating like crazy. It's being torn apart at the government level right now, and we should worry. Underfunding of NIH, National Science Foundation, on and on. Should it be more efficient? Can it be more efficient? Yeah, I worked in government, for sure, but this is not the way to go about it. And we need an immigration system that works. There was a deal last year on immigration. All of us would have been thrilled with that. And we need to say to our members of the House and Senate, hey guys, let's do that again. Let's bring it back up, let's get that passed. And we need to continue to invest in our social safety network, which is at risk. Because remember, the bottom 50% of Americans, without that, they're in real trouble. Rural hospitals are in real trouble. And we're not just a country that lives all in cities.
Right. So we're going to shift over to some really good news.
Good.
Talking about one of my favorite topics, global supply chains.
Ooh,
are you ready?
Yeah, I love it.
And by the way, one thing along those lines, I think I shared with you before we came up here. I was at Gartner down in Orlando this week, and one of the big common themes from a lot of supply chain leaders down there, from all sorts of sectors, all sorts of walks of life, you name, all sorts of functional levels, this common theme that global supply chain is a unifying force. whether that it means getting stuff done in DC or getting stuff done and just solving some of the challenges that we're faced with as an industry. And I think that is really good news. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree. I mean, the supply chain is how we knit ourselves together, right, as a world. And it is one of those, I totally believe it's a unifying force. And I think that reducing the friction in the supply chain is a role of government. I felt that the responsibility, that was my job, part of my job as Secretary of Commerce, was to try and reduce that friction. And to say to different countries that either weren't giving us access or that were making it difficult to actually trade, to say, come on, that's not in your, no country wants the United States to say, here's how you have to do it. I don't know about you, my children never responded well when I would wag my finger at them.
Never.
But if you explain, if you sit with a country leader or a government leader or a business person, you say, how do we find the common ground? How do we find what's in our best interest and make it about our? And I think supply chain is about our.
Undoubtedly, I think that kind of segues to the next point and question I'm going to pose to you. When we talk about the phrase supply chain these days, more and more, thankfully, and for me it's been for a long time, it's meant a very inclusive ecosystem, right? Not just the movement and the transportation of goods, but making, sourcing, engineering, returns and reverse logistics, the whole shebang. And I think you kind of view the definition of global supply chain very similar to that. You also see, if I've got this right from some of your earlier conversations, you see global supply chains as critical drivers of innovation and economic stability.
Sure.
Tell us a little more about that.
Well, first of all, as I said, if you think about it, we don't use almost anything, whether it's software or it's hardware or it's a car or it's your phone or any product that doesn't really come from a multiple places, right? The IP could be one place, the production could be another place, the ingredients or the materials could be from a third place. And so it is, and as you said, it's not just one way from raw material to product to a customer. It's also backwards, because I don't know about you, but I do purchase some things online and return some when they don't fit or they're not appropriate or it wasn't what I thought. And that's become a norm since COVID. I think the other thing, though, I was thinking about what's affecting how we think about supply chains now. And COVID did have a big impact on kind of the attitude, which is, am I just in time? I grew up, when I went to business school, the Kanban system was like, we're just in time, right? And that was all about, I can depend upon my supply chain. It's most efficient. The cost of having of inventory is reduced, and I can improve my margins. COVID taught us, boy, we better be just in case. We need a more predictable, more stable, more reliable, more dependable, more resilient supply chain. Because if I can't get everything I need, production either slows or stops, that costs me money, etc. And so this yin and yang between just in time and just in case is, I think, a reality that we're living with today. And then you throw geopolitics and policy on top of it. It makes it really complicated for all of us who are just trying to build a business and deliver a service or a good. And we're all becoming all too aware of the vulnerabilities and also the cost of delay. And then we're also feeling the effects of customer expectation.
Right.
I want it now, right? Or you better deliver it when you say, at the price, with the margin, etc., or you're going to be penalized. So it's complicated, but I think strong supply chains are essential to economic prosperity, national security, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and our innovation leadership. And the reason I say that is a national security. Think about the CHIPS Act. What's the CHIPS Act about? It's about we're way too dependent on other countries for an essential component. It started out to be an essential economic component, but it's now become both an essential economic component, but also a military and national security component called chips. And then the second is, or the third is from an innovation standpoint. We innovate collaboratively globally. And so, supply chain is essential there.
So a quick follow-up to that. And by the way, first part of your response, you talked about returns. Folks, you want a data nugget, National Retail Federation, their data showed about $890 billion in returns in 2024. Just for
$890 billion?
Yes, just for, million. I'll double check the fact. We'll get a returns factor from 2024, so stick with me. But also, speaking of the factoids, because we're going to pivot to workforce.
I bet it's $1 trillion.
I bet you're right. I bet it's billion.
Okay.
I get a question from Penny Pritzker, and I want to change my numbers, so I'll have to double check on that.
I think you're right.
But
I think you're right.
Earlier today, many of y'all heard one of the speakers talk about surveys. And Americans, to paraphrase, Americans said, hey, 80% of us want manufacturing here in the US. And then one of the other survey questions was, well, how many folks want to work in the manufacturing sector? 70%, right. We got a workforce challenge, right?
Well, and also, have you been to a factory lately?
I've been
Who's
to a
in
few.
a factory? Robots.
Yeah, lots of automation. Well, so I want to get back to optimizing true supply chain resilience, because you finished your thought on national security, right? And the resilience of global supply chain, I think, certainly protects that here, but also protects the sanity of humans everywhere and communities everywhere. What are a couple of priorities business leaders should keep in mind in terms of the workforce as it impacts supply chain resilience?
Well, I'm a believer that our workforce is our number one asset. And I think anybody in this room who's leading would say, yeah, the people are my most important asset. And I appreciate, don't get me wrong, I appreciate AI and all it does and is going to do for us. But to me, it's the shifting. When I was Secretary of Commerce, I made workforce, the skilled workforce agenda, one of my highest priorities, because I think we need a mindset change in this country, which is we have got to be constantly helping and intentionally helping more people gain the opportunity to adapt and thrive as we have an accelerating pace of change. I think our economy depends upon it. We can't just unemploy everybody. And I really fundamentally think that, as supply chains are more and more, technology is impacting supply chains. I mean, we've been to a port that's basically automated. I mean, it's extraordinary to see. So there's an impact on workers, whether it's from automation, digitization, AI, it's affecting a lot of roles. But if we as leaders can say, I've got the right kind of people in my team that are lifelong learners and adapting, and we develop training systems that are flexible, and we can't do it all ourselves. Government has to help us with that. We have to make it easier for us to be retraining ourselves. A friend of mine said, it's not like you get an education, it's like your gas tank. You fill up your gas tank, and then you use your gas tank throughout your lifetime. You now have to refill your gas tank. And so I think we need to embrace the change more and recognize that part of that is a responsibility and, frankly, a necessity that we help our workforce stay current.
Love that. And I completely share your sentiment. Workforce is the most precious thing we have. And along those lines, I heard it put a few days ago from a keynote I was tuning into. And the speaker said, hey, it's not about us helping our team, the human team members, learn new things as much as it is helping them let go of the things and practices we cling to. That's not nearly as relevant and is really holding us back and holding the industry back here in the golden age of technology. And I thought that was a really great and valid statement, right? 'Cause as humans, we all cling to how business has been done, and we've got a tremendous opportunity to change how business is done in supply chains and anywhere else. You mentioned AI. I know you're on the board with Microsoft, who's doing some really cool things in the AI space. Speak more, if you would, in terms of how AI is transforming and shaping the workforce of the future and really the work of the future. Your thoughts there?
Well, I think this is as big a revolution as it is from when we went from an agrarian society to an industrial society. And I think the pace of change is picking up faster and faster and faster as we better understand not just AI, but also how to use agents. And I think that we're all, as humans, going to walk around with on our phone or on our iPad or on our laptop, we're going to be walking around with a number of agents that are helping us both in our personal and professional lives. And I think that's a part of the evolution, the growth mindset. And honestly, we don't have it figured out in our business, but I'm starting to create agents and use them. I'm trying to get better at prompting. I now fight with my co-pilot because sometimes it's wrong, and I know it's wrong, and I'm like, no, that's not right. And then it apologizes, which actually makes me feel better. But what I don't think we're doing enough of with AI is a couple of things. One is, if you think about 100 years ago when we went from an agrarian to an industrial society, that's when the public education system was created. That's when workers and labor protections were created. That's when food safety rules were created. That's when safety net improvements occurred. We need to be thinking in that kind of big shift, not just take a chainsaw to everything, but how is it we need to change the way we're doing things? Not just government, but also the way the processes by which we do our business is going to change. And we have to bring our workforce along. And I think it's McKinsey or one of the big consulting firms said in 2025, they thought AI would replace 85 million jobs and create 97 million new jobs. Yes. So the point is, I don't think anybody knows whether those numbers are exactly right. It's a big shift, and it's a big change. And the skills that we're going to need, right, are changing, right? It used to be you put on your resume, I knew how to use Word and Excel and this and that, or I have this coding capability, or I speak this language or whatever. The skills we need are different. And bigger premium on problem solving, creativity, empathy driven roles. And but also critical thinking, adaptability, resilience, creativity. And we've got to change our mindset. And I think, then go to each of your sectors, whether you're in healthcare, frankly, diagnostics and patient care are changing rapidly. Finance and legal, the routine analysis, the routine report is getting automated. Retail customer service, there are AI now chatbots. We were talking about, I was talking earlier with Andrew, that people want to go end-to-end automated. I don't actually think end-to-end automated is going to be okay, because I think what's going to happen is we're going to need to have the human in the loop to make sure the automation isn't screwing us up. Before we thought the people are screwing us up. Now I think we're also going to have to make sure we have humans in the loop to make sure automation, just like when I get in an argument with my co-pilot, that it tells me something I know is wrong as a fact. It's, I think we are going to have to check the artificial intelligence too.
I tend to agree with you. Who else is, Penny's talking about arguing with Copilot and struggling with AI. I struggle with AI. Who else struggles with AI application deployment? Any other hands raised? Okay, y'all be honest. Come on. All right. A few more. Okay, I appreciate that.
But we're getting better.
We are getting better.
So this is really embarrassing. I got to tell you an embarrassing. So I said to Satya Nadella, we're at a board meeting, I said, Satya, I don't even know how to get good at this. And he said, start.
Right.
Just start. And he said, the more you try it, the more you'll think of things to do. Now I'm now starting the whole agent thing, which is you've actually got to code and put pieces together for it to actually help with processes. And I'm not as good at that, but we're going to learn. I'm going to force us to learn because yes, there are agents you can apply today to your call center or to this or to that, but I'm thinking about it as an executive. What are the processes that we could actually make easier? Like how about email management? Who would like an agent that could help you with email management? I would. I haven't found it yet, but we're working on it.
I love it. All right, so Penny, we're going to have a fast and furious finish. We're going to talk about one of your favorite topics and also one of mine, leadership.
Yeah.
Leadership. And I want to start with this. You've built and scaled multiple businesses, right? And given that, what's been one of the most important lessons learned in your journey that especially it applies to adapting to change, while at the same time, so adapting to change and growing, but protecting that company culture, which is so foundational for any organization.
Well, look, Scott, I shared my bias, which is I think our people are our most important asset. I even loathe saying the word asset because it makes people feel like they're not unique, because they are unique. And I think teams are everything. And so to me, culture starts with what do you believe in, how you approach, your business, and then what you value, your values. So we have, so we also have a bias, which is culture eats strategy for lunch.
Right.
In other words, and you've heard that before, but what does that mean?
I think breakfast and lunch.
Well, I think, what does that mean? When somebody says that, oh, that's cute, but what does it really mean? It means at the end of the day, you got to make sure you don't forego your values and how you want to be person to person, team to team, with a customer internally, externally, et cetera. What do you stand for when you're faced with the most difficult situations? Because in a day-to-day, when you're not stressed out, we can all be our best selves. It's when you're most stressed out is you really need to lean on your values. We have an acronym, maybe other people have an acronym, and I'm really proud of this because it came bottoms up, not top down. Like we were doing a new website and somebody said, you need to write our values. And I said, well, if there are values, I don't think I'm the one to write it. So we did it, the whole company came together and we created our ideals, which is integrity, empathy, diversity, humility, excellence, alignment, leadership, and service. So integrity, diversity, excellence, alignment, leadership, and service. And we ask ourselves when we're faced with hard decisions, what do our ideals tell us?
Yep.
What do our principles behind those words tell us in helping make decisions? And I think the first is, you have to bring this growth mindset. I mean, we're just in massive change. And if you think it's hard for you, I'm older than you, it's harder for someone who's older to change because you think you've learned a lot and you figure out you haven't. But when you go back to your principles, you realize your integrity is the thing your values are the thing you've got. Anyway, you've got to drive priority setting and accountability. Be curious about your blind spots and be optimistic.
Be optimistic. Practically, operationally optimistic. I love that. All right, so one of my final questions I'm going to ask you here, and we may have time for a couple questions, so y'all get your questions ready. And by the way, data factoid. I had a little press check in my earpiece. Returns last year was $890 billion, which is 17% of all purchases, and that's just for U.S. retailers. $890 billion of products.
$1 trillion. I think of it, it's almost $1 trillion of returns that have to be managed.
Yeah, I'll tell you. All right, so back to leadership, back to history. I'm a big history nerd. And I think you enjoy studying history, especially from a leadership and entrepreneurial standpoint. So in light of this environment we're going through now, and VUCA, hopefully some folks will appreciate that acronym as much as I have. Maybe not, but I think it's very relevant. So when you think of leaders through history, especially business leaders, entrepreneurs, what is one figure from history that might can offer us some inspiration for where we find ourselves here in 2025?
Okay, before I answer your question, I think there's something important to think about, which is what's important about leadership, right? You know, so when you judge, okay, is this person a great leader or not? Like, and particularly, as I said, I think real leaders shine in difficult times. So when I believe this is a challenging moment for business leaders. And so what am I thinking about before I get to who I respect most?
Sounds great.
I'm thinking about liquidity. And if I were you, I'd be saying, do I have enough liquidity I can manage my way through? Have I scenario planned enough that I say under the worst circumstances, I can manage through whatever you pick the time frame you think we're going to have this uncertainty? Having said that, and the second thing I would say is, if I need to restructure, do it now. Even though it's a hard time, don't wait. In other words, if I need to take action to make my business more effective, I'm going to do it now. Third thing I'm thinking about is I don't want to miss a strategic acquisition. So I want to be in a position where, because something's going to happen, and that's being opportunistic, which is my competitor's going to stumble, that business I always wanted maybe it's having trouble, or nobody else is going to buy it because they can't right now. So I want to be able to do that. And the last thing, or two other things I would say as a leader. One is, be aware of your blind spots and your biases. We all have biases. My bias, I'm too optimistic. And I just, be aware of that. I'm hoping things are going to get better, right? And hope is not a strategy. The other thing is over-communicate with your teams, right? Be really clear. Remember, it takes at least 7 times to communicate something for people to get it. So over-communicate as a leader. And finally, I would say what I just was talking about. In times like this, lead with your values. Do not walk away from your values. Okay, so if that's my criteria, is who do I think? I think Warren Buffett's a great business leader. And the reason is I think he brings, obviously we've all called him the Oracle and all this other stuff. Having had the privilege of meeting him and spending some time with him, he brings humility, he brings enormous clarity. He knows what he wants and what he doesn't want, and he knows why, and he knows at what price. And if it's not available, he's like, I'm okay. I don't, whatever. He's also research driven, right? It's not hunch, it's research driven. And it's not all about the latest and greatest, fanciest new technology. It's about basics. He doesn't mind owning a railroad or an insurance company or fundamental companies that have been around for a long time. And long-term thinking. I think we have way too much short-term thinking. We have to think about what does it mean? Every one of you is in the business of building a durable business and organization. You want this thing to live on, not just to exist as a form of sustenance, but as a thing to live on. And so I have enormous admiration for him for those reasons. So I think the reasoning matters as much as the name.
Love it. And I also love those, I think I counted 7 basically pieces of advice for business leaders as we navigate these times, these VUCA times. So outstanding. Bonus time with Penny Pritzker. I love it. Okay, folks, I know that we have got at least one question. Who would like to pose a great question to Penny? We've got one right here. And let us know your name and where you're from.
I'm Jameek. I'm actually from Enable.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you so much for being here today. one thing is, as soon as you said liquidity, my first thought was, oh, he's definitely going to say Warren Buffett. So that's excellent as your leader. My next question is, my question is, you mentioned often optimism, right? And even in trying times, having optimism. Is there one thing that you look at regularly that kind of, even if it's not a data point, just something that like every day or every week, every month brings you a little bit of hope or joy, kind of is the work that you do every day?
Okay, I have two things that I do. And I, one is I believe in the ingenuity of people. I believe we can screw things up, but I believe at the end of the day, humanity will figure the right thing out. So that's one thing that gives me hope. And the other thing is, I have 4 grandkids, and when I really despair, I look at a picture of the 4 of them, and I'm like, okay, they bring such, and it's not about my grandkids, it's about young people. I think young people are, you know, if given any chance, right, are optimistic. They're about what's possible, not about what's not possible. And I remember when I was first starting out, I started my first business, and it was all about what you could do, not all the barriers to getting there. Yeah. And I think that that's I think part of growth mindset. You know, it's an acronym, it's a statement or something like that. But this notion of what's possible. A lot of good things are possible. We just need to enable it and be intentional. But sometimes humanity goes off course for a while, but I'm hoping we'll pull ourselves back.
Hey, great question. And I love those sources of optimism, real practical optimism. Sometimes we do need injections of optimism by the day, and sometimes by the hour. So that's good stuff. Who else has a question for Penny up here? And while they take the mic, I've got a question for you. You were sharing with me, I won't go into everything, but kind of before I came up here, about the power of a eureka moment, the power of a moment of clarity, especially when you've been working on a breakthrough moment for 3 or 4 years. How important is it to stop, call timeout, and really, revel in that with the team? And we heard earlier about an organization, I didn't catch which one, that was throwing parties when they failed. Do y'all remember hearing that earlier? I think that's an interesting notion. But regardless, whether we're celebrating failures or we're celebrating those great eureka moments, we got to call time out and celebrate as a team, right?
Yeah, I think none of us as leaders should underestimate the stress people feel in general, just in life. Right. Life is complicated and hard, and you've got your work, you've got your personal life, you've got just the environment, et cetera, that you're dealing with. And I think people in general feel a lot of stress. And so I'm a believer in celebrations. I don't think the concept of celebrating failure, I think examining failure would be more where my head is at. In failing fast, celebrate that. In other words, that deserves positive feedback. But understanding, not over-rotating on who, but more on what can we learn from that to get better. But I think celebrating success or celebrating accomplishment, we don't do enough celebration. Yeah. We're all so darn busy running around doing whatever the hell it is that we're doing. And I think that as human beings, because we are surrounded by so much technology, we need more and more of that just human engagement, right? And celebrations are just that.
Excellent. I love that. I appreciate that. We do have one more question back here, right here. If you'd share your name and where you're from, what city you're from.
My name is Dan Levin, and I live near Palo Alto, California.
Yes.
Very impressive and highly educational session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are not, as an industry, known for our rapid adoption of advanced technologies. I think cloud computing in some circles would be considered sort of standard, but you'll find plenty of people in this room who are still running their information technology systems on premise. Share a few thoughts about how rapidly you feel AI and agentic AI are likely to be adopted in the real world, in a hardware distributor in Ohio, not in my hometown of Palo Alto.
I think it's years, not decades. Meaning, I think 3 to 5 years from now, it's just going to all look different. That may be optimistic, but I don't think I'm statistically way off. I think it's happening faster than you can imagine, because adoption's getting easier. And the challenge is exactly, Dan, the thing that you pointed out. If your data platform or backbone is so antiquated that you can't adopt, then you're going to struggle to keep up. And one of the things we're doing at our firm, we started this a year plus ago, is we're doing a whole review of we did a review of our data infrastructure, and we brought on somebody, and it means we're investing money, which nobody, which goes to margin and goes to bottom line, but we've just decided to survive and to thrive. We're going to have to, we have to function differently. So we're looking at all the different systems that we're using. It's scary when you realize how many different pieces of tools, we call them, that you're using. And then, are they all really working together? Are you really getting the most out of it? How much are you paying for it? Is the right hand and the left hand using the same tools, but procuring them separately? We're really reviewing all of that. And we have work to do. We know we have work to do, but we're in the middle of it. And I think it's a necessity. I don't think it's a nice to do.
And I tend to agree with you. Maybe months rather than years. Who knows? But
for some industries, it's going to be, and margin. I was talking to some of the folks from some of the big, let's call it not venture, not private equity, but sit in the middle. They're taking out what they are adding to their margin by quick application is extraordinary, and it's a wake-up call for all of us.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Great question, Dan. I appreciate that question. That's going to do it for this session. Ms. Penny Pritzker, really have enjoyed meeting you and getting you to share your insights and perspective. Been there, done that with everyone here. Round of applause for Penny, please.
Thank you. Scott, a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.